Hypocrisy.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Lawsplaining the Interwebs. I am your host, Nick Ricada of Ricada Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. How we doing today, chat? We are on YouTube exclusively, and ew, that feels dirty and disgusting and gross. But Rumble broke for me today. I set up the stream on Rumble Studio. What is happening with that? That is just hideous hair. That's cool. I set up the stream earlier on Rumble, and then I went to start it, and it didn't start on the Rumble Studio. And I'm like, clickety, click, 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 and it doesn't function. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll close this one out and create a new one. And when I went to create a new one, it's like, you have an active stream going. Which isn't true, obviously, because I'm looking at my Rumble channel and there's not a stream there. So we are on YouTube exclusively. Sorry about the delay, but I don't know, man. I guess I'm bad at technology. Like normal. But we're going to make this happen. We're going to watch Alec Baldwin's opening statements. I was hoping to do this earlier in the day, kind of, live or whatever, but life isn't working out that way for me to do that right now. So I decided I'd do it this evening, and we'd combine it with Trump's immunity discussion. The Trump immunity deal, or not deal, the Trump immunity decision from the Supreme Court has implications into Trump's existing cases. What is happening with it is weird. It's weirding me out. It's weirding me out. I'm sorry. I haven't been looking at myself lately. Anyway, Trump's immunity decision has far-reaching implications into his existing cases, including into his 34 felony convictions for the falsification of business records, which everyone likes to point to as Trump, our favorite felon presidential candidate. Like that's a big deal, I guess. They keep trying to make that into something, ignoring, of course, the reality that Alvin Bragg ran his campaign for the district attorney of Manhattan. He ran his campaign on the premise that he would prosecute Donald Trump. It was a literal political hit job, openly and notoriously, and everybody was just fine with it. And Trump was found guilty, unsurprisingly, because the standard for proving the falsification of business records is exceedingly low. And the interesting part of that is they don't even have to prove the crime that he was allegedly trying to cover up with the falsification of business records. They don't even have to name a crime. It's amazing. But they've done it. They've done it. They've convicted him. He's a convicted felon, but kind of not yet. Kind of not yet, because right after that conviction, presidential immunity came down, and the judge already has stayed the sentencing of Donald Trump. And a lot of people are wondering why. Why is the sentencing stayed? Why isn't he going through with it? Presidential immunity should apply to acts that happen while Trump is president, not acts that were, prior to him becoming president. And the interesting thing about that is, well, it's how the evidence is weighed and how the evidence came into that trial that really tipped the scales. That might tip the scales. It might not. So the conviction itself has to be reviewed by the judge, Judge Meacham, I think. Meacham. I don't know how to pronounce this stuff. I don't know these judges. I don't even like judges. But they have to figure out now if the convictions can even stand. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But right now, we're going to watch the live, direct from happening immediately. We're going to watch the Alec Baldwin opening statements. I have not watched these in full fairness. I have not watched them. I saved them for a live reaction on the show. And I have not kept up with all the goings on in this case. I'm coming into it naked, blind, and afraid, like a crack baby or whatever. That's how they come into the world too. Sometimes they're sometimes blind, but they're usually naked and afraid. Usually naked, often afraid. I think because their supply has been shut off, and they don't know when they're going to get their next hit. Unless they're some doctors maybe. I don't know. I've never. See, I'm talking about this. I don't even know how this works. Shit lips. Shit lips. How did you get shit lips as a name on YouTube? Like, how is that even allowed? He says, shave your head rackets. Being a skin is fun. No, Mr. Skinhead. He no here. He no here. He beat me. No, so we're not going to do that. Ginger finger. That was very funny. Very funny. But yeah, we're going to watch those opening statements. We'll see how they go. And I'm hoping to get a little bit more into the trial as it's live, but my daytime schedule is kind of, we'll say, it gets cluttered very quickly and on very short notice due to circumstances beyond my control that have nothing to do with anything that you've ever heard of. Shitlip says I make my own rules, Rackets. I like your attitude, man. I like it. Or madam, I don't know. I'm not here to judge. You identify yourself how you want to. You clearly make your own rules. I'm drinking my typical sweet tea, heavy cream, and vanilla tonight, which is delicious. Lefty Lulls, welcome to Paralegal Status. So without further ado, let's get into this, shall we? Look, I've got it right here from my favorite network, the Dan Abrams Handjob Network, Law and Crime. That's where they do law and crime, I guess. Here I'm going to criticize. I don't know why you would name something Law and Crime. Law and Order was taken, I'm sure. I guess they're saying they cover law and crime, but Fox doesn't cover Foxes. NBC doesn't cover NBCs or Peacocks or anything. So why would you call it Law and Crime? The Law and Crime Network sounds like something cooler than what it is. But it's really just a bunch of weirdos with cameras showing up in courtrooms and then filing copyright claims on people. Innocent little streamers like me. Oh, hey, what's up, Jenny LJ? How you doing? Nice to see you. But yeah, we're going to get into this. I'm going to try not to pause it too much. BTW 6301. Ricada Law could have partnered with Law and Crime if he could read social cues. Oh my God. Can you imagine the fucking horror of partnering with these people? I don't work well with others. I don't know if people have noticed that I don't work well with others. And I certainly don't work well with people at the Law and Crime Network. That would have been about the shortest partnership in the history of mankind. Shorter than Britney Spears' marriage to that guy in Vegas. Shitlips also says, I'm coming for Maddox's blanket. Wait and see. Wait, the slime blanket? The slime comforter? Get it. I hear that's how you get all the ladies. You got to have a slime blanket on your bed. How old is Maddox? His webpage is older than most of you. God, I think Maddox got to be like 45 now. So anyway, well, let's watch this. Like I said, I'm going to try not to pause it too much. And it's been such a long time since I've covered a Law and Crime thing. My Law and Crime copyright cut cage doesn't even fit anymore. It does fit. I forgot it would fit when. Oh, yes. I forgot it would fit. They got fatter. I have some weight loss tips for them. They got fatter though, and they no longer fit in the cut cage. Hey, swollen Abrams. Can we call you an Abrams tank? I have advice on how to lose some of those extra pounds, friend. Who are we kidding? I'm so happy that thing still fits. I didn't know. That's what she said. All right. We're going to watch this. And look, we're just here to have some fun tonight. I haven't watched this. Look at Alec Baldwin. He looks like a CNN anchor over here on the left. He's, hello, I have my thick brim glasses. And you know, Alec Baldwin is such a colossal asshole. Like, I love him. Don't get me wrong. I think I don't agree with his politics or anything. But I love him as an actor, and you know, he's got to be just fucking insufferable to be around. But you're like, well, but it's Alec Baldwin. You gotta, like, it's insufferable, but you want to hang around him anyway, which is when I wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror, that's what I say to me. Echo 36 says Binger does the opening and points AR at the jury. Alec Baldwin's like, I'll do my own opening statement. Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, pulls out a gun, just points it at him. This is a pistol. This is a pistol I would point where I want to point it. And sometimes that woman would get in my way. I never pulled the trigger. I willed the trigger to squeeze itself. And as it did, that woman stepped in front of my bullet for the last time. It was her fault entirely. How can I be a manslaughterer when it was a woman in the first place? And if she would have thought about it, she would have just stepped out of the way, like I've done in several movies. Just get away from bullets. They don't have to be there. They don't have to be inside of you. She kept me out of her. You can imagine Alec Baldwin just running his own opening statement. It'd be good. Probably better than mine. Amel says, want you on the panel, bro. What panel? Want you on the panel, bro. Which panel? The Expert says, thank you for wishing Valhalla awaits a happy birthday. By the way, Alec is totally wearing Rachel Maddow glasses. Actually, I've chosen to live my life as a lesbian, which shows that I do love women, in fact, and I'm very sad that I killed that one. He takes the spacey defense. He becomes a woman and a homosexual at the same time. I support his decision, Alec Baldwin's decision to live a brave life as a lesbian. Also, I think there are allegations of him domestically abusing women, which would fit along with the lesbian relationship. So I'm very proud of him for him for doing that. Without further, oh wait, do you mean the Law Tube panel, Amel? Shitlip says Baldwin is bald in name only, hard shun. Wait a minute. I just have to know. Do you mean that? Because I heard there was like a panel of simul streaming law tubers where they're all like streaming, but they're doing it on their own channels, but it's like an aggregate effort. Amel says Alec Baldwin with the others. Yeah, I think that's what you're talking about. Ooh, I don't know if I don't know, man. That sounds terrible. That sounds like a really, really awful thing that I don't want to do. I can't imagine that. Very weird. All right, let's do this. Let's watch this opening statement. I'm going to try and not pause it too much. I assume this is the prosecutor. She's going to be going first. The state goes first in these things, and we'll see how it goes.
When someone plays make-believe with a real gun in a real life workplace, and while playing make-believe with that gun violates the cardinal rules of firearm safety, people's lives are endangered and someone could be killed.
Okay, I know I'm not supposed to pause this all the time. First of all, there was a really like weakly worded opening statement. Second of all, not to nitpick, but this isn't just a workplace. It's not like, oh, let's play make-believe at the office water cooler, waving a gun around like an idiot. I mean, this is a place. I don't even want Alec Baldwin. I want Alec Baldwin to lose this trial, except that I hate the state so much that I want him to win. I can't figure out what would be funnier. But here's like, I feel bad for the dead lady. Like I really do. I think she's the real victim here. Alec Baldwin is the second victim, but the dead lady is the first victim. Okay. And, but let's give him a little deference. He was supposed to point a gun in a way like that all was supposed to happen. He was supposed to play make-believe with the gun and point it. That's what he was supposed to do. So to me, you're already losing me on this opening statement. Cause again, it's not like he's, at a status meeting at an advertising firm. He's like, look, here we go. And he pulls out, he whips it out. And then he's sitting there pointing it at people, make believe bullets. And then he shoots one. That would be insane. The problem here is not that he pointed a gun at someone. The problem is that the violation of the rules of safety were that the gun was loaded with a live round, for one, and that while he was pointing the gun, he pulled the trigger at a time he wasn't supposed to pull the trigger, and people were in the way. Like, he did a bunch of things that he shouldn't have done, but in the context of pointing the gun in that direction at that time, it's not really out of place. And this is what I don't like about this opening statement. It's not very carefully crafted at the start. I mean, we're a minute in and I'm already 20 seconds in and I'm already criticizing it. This is not good. Shitlip says, shut up, chat. Coke is rad and fun, so quit crying. The feeling you get from a Coca-Cola classic. You can't beat the real thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's what this case is about. It's simple.
That's not what the case is about. It's not simple or straightforward, actually.
The evidence will show that someone who played make-believe with a real gun and violated the cardinal rules of firearm safety is the defendant, Alexander Baldwin.
Don't call him Alexander.
You will hear over the course of the next few days that in the fall of 2021, a movie called Rust began filming at the Bonanza Creek Ranch just south of Santa Fe in Santa Fe County.
Santa Fe?
You will learn that this movie was a Western with a lot of gun action. And while it was a movie set,
gun action,
it was a real life workplace for many people. But you will hear this workplace was on a tight budget.
Ooh, a tight budget.
And you will learn that some of the people who were hired to work at this workplace were very inexperienced.
Yeah, see, these are
and
problems.
One of those was the armorer, a very young woman.
Armor her, know what I'm
Hannah
saying?
Gutierrez Reed.
That wasn't funny.
You will hear testimony from crew members who worked on the set.
Yeah, but they're all union. I don't trust them.
That to them, Ms. Gutierrez's inexperience was obvious.
Did she say?
You will also learn that this workplace has some talented
I'm
people.
too Midwestern. I'm like, Gutierrez.
And one of those was the director of photography, a vibrant 42-year-old rising star named Helena Hutchins. You will
Vibrant,
also learn
42 and rising star.
that
Sounds
the
like me.
director of this film
was
Joel
Helena.
Souza, another talented individual.
Oh, Joel's a victim too. He gets forgotten because the one woman died and he managed to beat death.
The evidence will show, ladies and gentlemen, that like in many workplaces, there are people who act in a reckless manner. And place other individuals in danger and act without due regard for the safety of others. That
who's the blonde lady in the background?
Was the defendant, Alexander Baldwin, the lead actor.
Who's the blonde ogress in the background?
You will learn
I don't trust bald guy back there.
Filming on or about October 6, 2021.
The hair on his chin is pulling his face forward. The hair that's not on his head is not keeping it.
On set to begin working until about October 13th. And you will learn that prior to arriving on the set to work, he requested to be assigned the biggest gun available.
The biggest gun available.
So he was assigned this revolver.
Okay, come on. This is why I hate prosecutors. It doesn't matter if he was requested to be assigned the littlest gun available. They're going to kill someone either way. I want you to assign me the biggest gun available. It'll kill harder than the rest. I want the biggest gun. I need the biggest gun. Alec Baldwin, the big star of the big movie and the big producer, wants the big gun. He wants the big Western revolver. Okay, but that has nothing to do with him pointing a gun inappropriately at someone, not checking to see if it was loaded. He could have checked if it was loaded with his mouth, right? Like Kurt Cobain did that. He found out the shotgun was loaded. But Alec Baldwin could have tried that, and he didn't. And so then he pointed it at a person and pulled the trigger. It doesn't matter if it was a fucking 38 or if it's a big fucking revolver. Like, it does not It wouldn't matter which gun it was. He picked the biggest gun possible, which meant he was recklessly killing women. Come on, fucking stop. Just stop. You don't need this. Just make a concise statement of the facts. Alec Baldwin did not clear the gun. He did not hire proper staff who would have the training and experience necessary to keep live rounds separate or even off the set entirely. There were no adequate safety checks. And when he was doing a rehearsal shoot, he pulled the trigger that shouldn't have been pulled. Now a woman is dead due to his recklessness. That's manslaughter, ladies and gentlemen. Doesn't matter if the gun was the size of his penis or a different penis. Guns are extension of penises. Peni, if you will.
A replica of an 1873 single-action revolver manufactured by Pieta Firearms in Italy.
I only use double
You
action.
will hear from Alessandro Pieta, who will tell you he manufactured this gun.
Oh, hello.
And he will tell you he manufactured it in 2015. And he will explain the quality control measures that Pieta Firearms follows in order to ensure that firearms that are manufactured by Pieta Firearms don't have any
bring in an
problems or
expert
issues.
to eliminate the accidental
Mr.
discharge.
Pieta will tell you
The one where
that
Alex says, that never happens
this
to me.
firearm he himself manufactured.
Oh my God, I
And
shot
that
all over
when
that woman.
Pieta
That never
sent
happened.
it to EMF, which is the company that distributes firearms for Pieta Firearms in the United States, this gun was in perfect working condition. You will hear from Justin Neal, who is a representative of EMF, a company out of California that has historically been known to provide firearms to the movie industry. Mr. Neal will tell you that when EMF received this firearm in 2017, it was in perfect working order. And in fact, when EMF had this firearm,
that's 3 years
it
later.
was subjected to numerous quality control inspections because it was used as a show gun.
The
at
Shogun
gun
of
shows.
Harlem. Showed up.
The evidence will show that in September of 2021, an individual by the name of Seth Kenny was contacted by the folks with Russ Production. They asked Mr. Kenny if he would be able.
Does this lawyer here behind, like, creeping eerily over her shoulder, does this guy look like he looks like a more expensive model of Mark Zuckerberg, right? Like he's like the upgraded one, but he doesn't make as much money. You know what I mean? Like it's like the luxury one that no one actually wants because it's impractical. I don't know. It's creeping me out. Did someone say DUI, guys, in the audience? Wonder if he offered to represent Alec Baldwin and then took it back. USSJ4 Broly says, hope he wins. This is a stupid trial. I don't think he should worry ever about a magical live bullet being on a movie set ever. There's no way he should be responsible. Two assumed others failed. What the fuck? Well, I mean, he did kind of hire them. That's part of his potential culpability. Although I heard as a producer, I heard his role as a producer is not on trial. So that kind of complicates things. But the jury, if they're able to conflate it with the jury, it doesn't matter. James K sent a chat in, but there's no message. So thank you. I appreciate that. But he's the Amazon version of Zuckerberg. Hey, what's up, Sonia? Thanks for stopping in. Nice to see you. Oh my gosh. All right, here we go.
Able to provide some firearms for the filming.
Koof says,
for use during the filming.
thank you for not killing yourself. You're welcome.
You will learn that Mr. Kenny owns PDQ Firearm and Prop. It's a duly licensed firearms dealership. Mr. Kenny then contacted EMF and ordered several single action replica revolvers. And in September, or on September 29, 2021, Mr. Kenny purchased this gun.
This guy looks angry.
And you will hear that Mr. Kenny received it from EMF and it was in perfect working order. The only thing that Mr. Kenny did to this gun was to insert the firing pin, because since it was a show gun, it didn't have a firing pin. But you'll learn that that's a
Hey, what's up,
very
Sherry?
easy step. All he had to do was just insert the pin, and that's it. And then Mr. Kenny had the firearms, this one and some other firearms, transferred to the set of Rust at the Bonanza Creek Ranch. And on October 13th, 2021, the defendant was supposed to have a training session with this gun and this young armorer. But you will see
I don't need
that
to
during
train.
this training session,
Alec Baldwin's an expert at
defendant
using guns.
had
One shot, one
somebody
kill.
or a couple of people filming him while he's running around shooting this gun. You will learn,
It does
ladies
kinda
and
look
gentlemen, or
Baldwin
you'll
in the
hear
audience.
during
You
this
see
trial
them?
the use of the words prop gun.
Prop gun?
And you'll learn a prop gun is this real gun. It's not a toy. It's not made of rubber.
It's not a
real
toy
gun.
if you're poor, but if you're rich,
You
it's a
will
toy.
also see evidence, ladies and gentlemen, that during the days before that
Geeky Candy says Blonde Ogre is one of Alec's sisters. The Baldwin genes have no mercy. Oh my God.
fateful October 21st day, the defendant handled this firearm multiple occasions. You will see video footage of the defendant firing this firearm, working perfectly
Oh,
fine.
James from court is there too?
But you'll see evidence, ladies and gentlemen, that each time the defendant handled this firearm, he did not do a safety check with that inexperienced armorer.
Well, if she was inexperienced, I don't know if the safety
you'll
check would have
hear
done much
that the
good.
reason he didn't do a safety check is because he didn't want to offend her. The
Okay,
evidence you will
guilty.
see
guilty.
will paint a real life picture
What an ass.
of a real life workplace where this
I don't want to
defendant,
offend you by doing a safety
mishandled
check with
this
you, you
gun.
dumb broad.
you will see him using this gun as a pointer to point at people, to point at things. You will see him
Like that episode
cock
of The
hammer
Simpsons when Homer got a gun, was
when
just
he's
using
not
it to do
supposed
everything.
cock the hammer. You will see him put his finger on the trigger when his finger's not supposed to be on the trigger. You will hear
Alec Baldwin is always
about
ready to
numerous
kill.
breaches of firearm safety with this defendant and this use of this firearm. And the evidence will show that on the morning of October 21st, 2021, the camera crew walked off set.
They walked
And
off
you
set.
will learn that one of the reasons that camera crew walked out is because they were concerned over safety breaches with the use of firearms. The evidence will show that the morning of October 21st started out a couple of hours behind.
No, the morning
They
of October.
filmed some scenes at this church.
The morning of October 21st started out on time. Like the morning starts out when the morning starts. It doesn't, you can't have a morning start behind. Like I'm late all the time, but morning arrives when morning arrives. It's what a fucking weird. The morning of October 21st started out a couple hours late. Nope. No, it wasn't. The morning didn't sleep in, actually.
On the Bonanza Creek Ranch. And you will see that one of those scenes required the defendant to pull out his gun. This was in the morning.
I was forced
Pull
to
out
pull out
his
my
gun.
gun.
And you'll hear the director tell him, pull it out and hold it. And the first time you'll see evidence the defendant does what the director tells him. But you will hear the
Glenn
director
guilty,
tell
Glenn
you
Ross.
that many times the defendant would do his own thing. So then the director in the morning asked him, okay, do it again, just like you did now. The defendant pulls out the gun, but this time he cocks the hammer.
It rhymes with
The evidence will
cocks.
show they then broke for lunch. And around 1:30 or so, they came back to this church to do what's called a blocking. The evidence will show that Ms. Hutchins wanted to do a blocking for an insert. And you will learn what a blocking is, just working out the details of the moves of the actor.
I see the
Wasn't
jury
even a
has not
rehearsal.
done community theater. They'd know what
You
blocking
will hear
was.
from one of the witnesses who walked into the church and
Alec Baldwin's like, well, if she would have done some blocking, maybe the bullet wouldn't have gotten to her. James K says, I completely screwed up that first attempt, Nick. Yeah, you did. Very, very disappointed in you. I heard about your recent alleged issues. I've been a fan for a while. Still love you, and I'm glad to see you still doing your thing. Hey, thanks. Yes, those alleged issues are certainly interesting. Very, very interesting. Geeky Candy says the armorer was a mouthy cunt. I don't blame him one bit for wanting to keep his distance. Well, yeah, I get that, but not wanting to do a safety check to not offend her. He should have been trying to offend her. Listen here, you blue-haired idiot. Can you even spell gun? Probably not.
Saw the defendant kind of playing with his gun. And then you will see evidence or hear evidence that Ms. Hutchins and Mr. Souza were talking to the defendant about doing this insert. And the insert was just
Chitlip
supposed
says
to be from here
Baldwin
to
deserves
here,
the wall.
and it was supposed to be of the defendant just slowly taking his gun out of his holster, and just holding it at an angle.
Geeky Candy says, also recall the armorer Wi-Fi handle,
show that
Gorilla Grip pussy.
someone asked the armorer to bring the defendant's gun to him. And she did. She brought it into the church, showed it to David Halls, who you will learn was the first assistant director. The gun was empty. Ms. Gutierrez then handed the gun.
This guy in the background is really active.
But then you will hear that Ms. Gutierrez was given the gun back.
You're reading a Marine recruiting flyer?
And she took it and loaded it with dummy rounds. And what you will learn is that dummy rounds are inert rounds.
You're a dummy round.
They look like real rounds, but they are very easy to tell that they're not because they'll rattle.
Melfi's
Ms. Gutierrez then went back
the armorer has been found guilty already. I think the prop master
revolver to
maybe
the
was
first
too.
assistant director very fast. They only checked about 3 rounds, very quick. And they missed 1 round. You will learn that one of the rounds in that revolver was a real round. And the evidence will show that Ms. Gutierrez then handed the gun to the defendant. And what you will learn is that once again, the defendant failed to do a gun check or a safety check with this armorer. So he takes the firearm, puts it in his holster. Then Ms. Hutchins and Mr. Souza were doing this blocking. And the evidence will show, ladies and gentlemen, that the defendant, again, did his own thing. You will hear from an individual by the name of Kent Jorgensen. Mr. Jorgensen will tell you that he's been involved in drafting and revising movie set safety rules.
Kent Jorgensen.
You will learn that these movie set safety rules require actors like the defendant to treat every firearm as though it's loaded, to never point a firearm at another person, and to never put your finger on the trigger unless you're prepared to shoot or to destroy whatever's in front of you.
Well, I was
The
prepared.
evidence will show that on October 21st, 2021, after that lunch break, the defendant once again violated those set safety rules. And during this blocking, the director had instructed him to just slowly take out that gun and just hold it at an angle. But you will see that the defendant takes it out quickly the first time, points it. And you will hear witness testimony who will tell you the first time he does it, his finger is on or around the trigger. He does it again, takes it out very fast, points it. And once again, you will hear testimony that his finger was on or around the trigger. And the evidence will show that that third and fatal time, he takes it out once again, fast. Hammer's cocked, he cocks the hammer.
When the hammer's cocked, but he cocks the hammer.
Points it straight at Ms. Hutchins and fires that gun.
That's the problem.
That live bullet right into Ms. Hutchins' body. You will learn that this bullet was a .45 caliber round that entered Ms. Hutchins' body right underneath her right underarm. It perforated her right lung. It traveled through her spine, lacerating her spinal cord, and then it exited on the left side of her back. That bullet then went into Joel Souza's right shoulder, and it came to rest in his back, from where doctors removed it once he was transported to St. Vincent's Hospital here in Santa Fe.
See, the interesting thing about this
You
is,
will
of
learn,
course,
ladies and gentlemen,
there's a
that
bunch of people who should
Ms.
have
Hutchins
prevented that
did not
round from
have the
getting
same
into the
fate.
gun in the first place.
you will see the
Silica
aftermath
Beastmaster says, praying for you and the family, brother. Hey, thank
of the
you.
shooting,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
and you will see medics frantically working to save Ms. Hutchins, to stabilize her, to transport her, to airlift her to UNM Hospital. But the damage from that bullet was too much. Ms. Hutchins succumbed to her injuries and bled to death. The evidence will show that meanwhile, after the shooting, the defendant began to claim he didn't pull the trigger.
I never pulled that trigger.
The evidence will show, ladies and gentlemen, that's not possible. You will hear from Mr. Pieta himself, who will tell you that gun will not discharge without a pull of the trigger.
I mean, to be fair,
You
though,
will hear
Mr.
from
Pieta hasn't
firearms
seen that
experts
gun in
who will
fucking
tell
6
you
years.
That gun will not discharge without a pull of that trigger.
I mean, I agree, but
The evidence will show that
didn't Brandon
law enforcement
Herrera do a
officials
great
arrived
video about
at
how
the
this gun
scene
could not have
on
accidentally
October
fired?
21st after the shooting, and immediately took this gun into their custody. Then later, they asked the FBI for assistance in processing this gun for forensics and examination. You will learn that the gun and some ammunition that was taken from the set and from PDQ arms were sent to the FBI for analysis. You will learn that the gun first went to the DNA section of the lab, where a DNA analyst found the defendant's DNA on this gun. And then the gun
DNA
was
analyst,
transferred to the
please.
firearms and tool mark section of the lab, where a firearms examiner examined this gun very carefully and closely. Bryce Ziegler, who is the firearms examiner for the FBI, will tell you that when he received this firearm, he first examined it.
Wings,
He
welcome
didn't
to
see any
paralegal
defects,
status.
didn't see any modifications. He tried and he checked the hammer in the 3 different positions, cocking positions. He checked the quarter cock position, fine.
Quarter cock
Checked
position.
the half cock position,
Half cock.
fine. Checked the full cock position, fine.
Look, he likes it when it's a quarter
And when
cock,
he
a half
held it in the
cock, or a
full
full
cock
cock.
position, you will hear that hammer held.
And hammer holds
Until
in
he
the
pulled
full
the trigger.
cock, baby.
You will also hear that Mr. Ziegler test fired this gun 12 different times. And each time
Talk to me, Mr.
that
Ziegler.
gun fired as it was designed. Each time when he pulled that trigger, it fired. And he will tell you that not once did this gun malfunction or discharge on its own. Now, the evidence will show that because the defendant had been claiming that he didn't pull the trigger, Mr. Ziegler suggested one last test to the sheriff's department.
Let's check it out.
Mr. Ziegler told the sheriff's department that he could do what's called an accidental discharge test. He obtained authorization to do this
Accidental
test. And you will
discharge,
hear
always
that he left
embarrassing.
that test for last because
Alec Baldwin
that
found out.
test
It cuts the fun short.
could potentially damage the gun. Mr. Ziegler went forward after he received this authorization and conducted the accidental discharge test. And you will hear, ladies and gentlemen, that during that test, a couple of the internal components of this firearm damaged.
Oh, man. So the
You will
FBI
hear
damaged
that
the evidence? Oh, that's
The
weird.
trigger sear and the full cock hammer notch were damaged during the accidental discharge testing.
Oh, man. Now they can't,
The evidence will show, however, that before
Can't
this
allow the
accidental
defendants to test
discharge
it on their own,
testing
can
by
they?
the FBI, this gun functioned and worked perfectly fine. You'll
This is a beautiful part of how trials work. Like, look, When the government tried it, it was perfect. And then they damaged it. And now you can't try it because it doesn't work the same. But you gotta know, you're gonna find out that when the government was doing it before they damaged it, it worked. I know you can't check because they damaged it, but you just have to trust, because you can always trust the government with evidence, because the government would never fuck up evidence. That doesn't happen. The government would never damage evidence and make it like unattainable for you to test that evidence yourself as a defendant. I mean, that would be wild. That never happens, does it? God, whew. Don't worry though. The government is there to explain how the government did it right, even though you can't verify it. How curious.
See the video footage of the multiple occasions during which the defendant used this firearm on the set. And each time he fired it, it was working just fine. And in fact, you'll hear evidence that the defendant himself admitted in December of 2021 that this gun didn't have any mechanical problems. You will hear from the two of the country's leading experts on firearms forensics, Michael Haig and Lucian Haig.
Why are they the leading experts?
And they will tell you that
the
they
Haig brothers.
examined the revolver
It's a Haig
and the
convention.
damaged pieces extensively.
Koof says, remember the whole door
They will
fiasco
tell
with
you
Waco?
that the damage to the full
Don't talk about
top
Waco.
trigger notch is consistent with the accidental discharge testing that was conducted by the FBI. Lucian Haig will tell you that in August of 2023, he examined the trigger sear, the other piece, and that when he looked at it initially with the naked eye, there was nothing wrong with it. He couldn't see anything.
Now, when I looked at it,
he put it under the microscope.
Under the microscope.
And he noticed some kind of rough microscopic diagonal lines on the surface of the trigger sear.
We prefer to say diagonal.
And since at the time he did not know how Mr. Ziegler had conducted the accidental discharge test, he opined that these very small microscopic lines were likely not caused by the FBI accidental discharge testing, but he could not exclude that as the source of those lines. Then a few weeks ago, Mr. Haig will tell you that he spoke with Mr. Ziegler and he learned how Mr. Ziegler had conducted the accidental discharge test. Mr. Ziegler explained that he affixed that firearm onto a fixed platform and then struck the firearm on 6 different planes with a rubber mallet. And Mr. Ziegler explained to Mr. Haig that he had not affixed the mallet to another fixed device. Instead, he did it freehand. Mr. Haig will tell you, with his 50 plus years of experience as a firearms forensics expert, he opined or concluded that those very tiny microscopic diagonal lines on the surface of the trigger sear were likely caused by the FBI's accidental discharge test. The evidence will show, ladies and gentlemen, that regardless of how those tiny microscopic lines got on that trigger sear, these firearms experts will tell you that those would not affect the functionality of this firearm.
Now, I'm guessing the defense's expert is going to say the opposite.
At the end of this case, ladies and gentlemen, you are going to conclude and be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that on October 21st, 2021, that gun the defendant had asked to be assigned worked perfectly fine as it was designed, and that the fatal and one of the main problems that afternoon of October 21st was that the defendant didn't do a gun safety check with that inexperienced armorer. He pointed the gun at another human being, cocked the hammer, and pulled that trigger.
Boom.
In reckless disregard for Ms. Hutchins' safety, and you will be convinced
Will
that
they
the
be
only
convinced?
true and just verdict in this case, so that true justice can be served, is a verdict of guilty to involuntary manslaughter. Thank you.
Oh, wait. Shit. I wasn't supposed to do that.
Spiro?
All right. I'm looking forward to this guy. He looks like a stern individual.
Just touch the screen. Yeah. I have to touch it harder.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Let's mute the microphones so they're going to have a little pre-argument conference. Well, that guy is aerodynamic as hell.
All set? May I proceed? Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning. This was an unspeakable tragedy, but Alec Baldwin committed no crime. He
Attaboy.
was an actor acting, playing the role of Harlan Rust. An actor playing a character can act in ways that are lethal, that just aren't lethal on a movie set. These cardinal rules, they're not cardinal rules on a movie set.
See, that's great.
And I don't have to tell you much more about this because you've all seen gunfights in movies. And the reason that can happen is because safety is ensured before the actor. On this movie set, there were people responsible for ensuring the safety of the set and the firearm. Those people failed in their duties, but Alec Baldwin committed no crime. The most critical issue in this case is how a real bullet got on a movie set. The evidence will show that real bullets are never supposed to be on movie sets. Movie sets use dummies and blanks. Movie sets use dummies, fake inert bullets that look like real bullets. They don't go
Lots
bang,
of dummies on movie
for
sets.
when you want a close-up of the gun. You can't tell them apart from live bullets by looking at them, which is
Real quick, just a short, stark contrast in the opening statement of this guy versus the state. He either took notes on what the state's opening statement was going to be right from the beginning, or he just had it planned because he knew that that's where they were going to go. But he's like, yeah, of course there are rules, but not on a movie set. At a movie set, people point guns at other people all the fucking time. All right. And you've got safety checks in place that are allowing the actors to do their role, because if they're acting, they can't be thinking about all the normal rules that are going on. They're I mean, I don't necessarily agree with this, but what you want to convince the jury is that the actor is absolved of having to worry about those safety concerns because you have staff, just miles of staff preventing this from happening, so that by the time you get the gun, all you're worried about is, are you in character? Is your accent on point? Do you remember your lines? Do you remember your blocking? Have you polished up your face enough to like look right for the camera? Do you have enough gritty fine lines on your face and fake dirt and all that shit? Are you ready to shoot the scene and not worry about shooting the woman? That's what he's saying. And he said it really quickly with just, when you're acting as an actor on a movie set, the rules are not the same. And that's critical here, because the entire case, and I've made this statement so many times, the number one rule of gun safety: you don't point a gun at someone. You always treat it as if it's loaded. And if you pull the trigger, you're going to kill them, even if it's not loaded. That's just rule one of gun safety. Now it's one of those aspirational rules that's completely impractical in many situations. There's lots of times where you are perfectly fine pointing a gun and pulling a trigger because you've cleared the gun. There's no rounds in any magazine. A magazine isn't in there. There can be there can be some sort of disabling mechanism. All sorts of things can prevent a gun from firing very, very reliably and let you go, point it at whoever you want, yourself, whatever, and pull the trigger and not kill anybody. All of that stuff was supposed to be done prior to the gun getting into Alec Baldwin's hands. So if you're the state and you're hinging your entire case on Alec Baldwin breaking the rules of gun safety, well, yeah, the rules of gun safety don't exist on a movie set. They have other rules in place, professional rules. So you have to actually get into him violating the standard of the movie set's rules. Now, since there's a jury there, you really just have to convince the jury that he violated some set of rules, and that violation ends up with a dead person. Since you have a dead person, it's very Easy to show that something went fucking wrong. Now you just have to pin the blame on Baldwin. But his opening statement was directly on point, whereas her opening statement was ludicrous. It's like, well, in a workplace. It's like, but this isn't a regular workplace. And I love that he contrasted that very well. Is it going to be effective? Who knows? But when we get to pause and opine on it, it works great. Chandler Smith says, love you, Nick. Also, fuck the state, fight back, give them absolute hell. Even if you did snow, who fucking cares? Clearly, anyone with a brain knows kids were not involved. Shit pisses me off. Love you, brother. Stay strong. It's funny. The internet has created a story that the state hasn't even alleged, and the internet has then decided it to be true. But all of that, is for another day. That's for court, not for streams. Joe Moses says, and Anthony Hopkins was really eating people. That I believe. Look at him. He's a healthy, sturdy man. I mean, clearly eating. He's removing the fats.
Is why live bullets can be nowhere near a movie set. And if the director wants a shot of the gun going, bang, poof, there's blanks that they can use. And those blanks look nothing like real bullets. And they are used for those shooting scenes. And, they'll play these videos that they describe.
These little videos.
Firearm in the movie going bang, poof. And people are conditioned to seeing people firing weapons and thinking that's a dangerous act. That's a dangerous act. And they will play those videos and give you that image to try to tarnish him in your eyes. But that's not what happened here. On this set, there was a real bullet, something that should never be on a movie set, something which has nothing to do with making a movie. And you will hear no evidence, not one word, that Alec Baldwin had anything to do with that real bullet being brought onto that set.
I didn't bring the bullet.
The second critical issue in this case is, why did a real bullet get loaded into a prop movie gun? It is undisputed that the bullet was loaded into the gun by the armorer, the person on set whose responsibility it was to ensure the gun was safe. And so picture that moment of the armorer placing a live bullet into that firearm. You hear the prosecutor say, he did this, or he performed in a certain way. He picked out the biggest gun as his prop. It's to tarnish him in your eyes. You will hear no evidence whatsoever. No evidence that anything Mr. Baldwin did, that something he did in that moment, that horrible moment when she put that bullet in that gun, none of it had anything to do with Alec Baldwin. And finally, the first assistant director's job, the head of safety, Dave Halls, checks it before it goes to the actor. And he will tell you he made a tragic mistake. He failed to detect a live bullet. And Alec Baldwin had nothing to do with that either. So all this evidence that the prosecutor just outlined, all of it, has nothing to do with these critical issues. Nothing. Which leads us to this. The evidence will show that on a movie set, safety has to occur before the gun is placed in the actor's hands. In this case, this unique case on a movie set, the prop gun was placed in Mr. Baldwin's hands and cold gun was announced.
Cold
meaning
gun?
It had been checked and double checked by those responsible to ensure the gun was safe. It was just a prop. They all thought it was just a prop and could do no harm.
I don't think they thought it was just a prop.
To rehearse, to choreograph his moves, to memorize his lines. He's Harlan Rust. He's an outlaw running for his life, who in the incident in question, he's pulling a 6-shooter to try to defend himself.
Okay,
That's why the gun has to be safe before it gets into
he is acting. He's not Harlan Rust.
His mind is somewhere else, in the being of another, a century away, an outlaw. He must be able to take that weapon and use it as the person he's acting would. To wave it, to point it, to pull the trigger like actors do, in ways that would be lethal in the real world, but are not lethal on a movie set. And I'm going to show you that scene now before lunch. And if we could just play action.
Oh man, I feel like we're watching the whole movie.
I'm gonna go find some help.
I don't need no damn help.
I don't need no damn help.
He's wounded on the run.
Me 04120 says,
Continue.
Your Honor, it was prop cocaine. He's not wounded on the run though. He's Alec, he's acting. He's the greatest actor in the whole world. It's like a fucking meme of
Harlan Rust.
like they're trying to pull the South Park movie or the South
If
Team
you
America
stand up
defense.
nice and slow, toss any weapons you have.
He's on the church pew, bleeding, his hand gripping the revolver. He would defend himself against the men in the movie. Play.
One more. You good? Ready?
He's not actually that guy though.
Harlan Rust,
The jury's not going to believe that he's actually Harlan Rust.
did you get up nice and slow, toss any weapons you have?
Well, how close can I get right there?
Joe, you want me to wait to give you that line till he lands, till camera lands?
Yep.
7 minutes. Draw your gun and look up and point your gun, okay?
Okay, which way? Camera right or left? So camera left for now.
I'll stand right here for you, Alec.
So whip it out. Okay, well, let me get this all greased. Ready? Okay, ready? Okay, ready? Ready.
And set. Ready, and action.
Harlan Rust,
Harlan Rust.
Do one more just like that. You got one more? Yeah.
Ready, ready?
They want him to do it again. There's no danger. They want him to do it again. And set, ready, and action.
Do it again.
Harlan Rust,
You like pointed it the wrong way at first there, Alec.
It's a scene similar to scenes we've all seen in movies and television, performed by thousands
That's an
of actors.
unfortunate looking
And the scene
person.
that continues after lunch is the same scene. It's just not unfortunately captured on videotape. And the scene they envisioned and acted out, that prop gun was positioned in the afternoon so close to the camera that you could see inside, that you could feel it. You could feel that it was loaded, and it was loaded, of course, with dummies. Dummies to make it look like a real gun. But this one time, one of those dummies was a real bullet. The real
One of
bullet
those
was
dummies
not known
was a
to
dead
anyone
woman.
in that church.
Damn.
Amongst the actors, directors, and crew in the scene, everyone was doing exactly how they go about their business every day on a movie, not as if some lethal element had been included in the environment. You will see creativity and movement and everyone talking and vibrant. No one had any idea that this venomous, toxic element had been inserted into this magic they were creating. But it did.
Venomous.
It entered that place. It killed an amazing person. It wounded another, and it changed lives forever. And so to find out what happened on that movie set, you need to do something that the prosecutors could never do. You have to step back and remember what they were doing on a movie set. What were Helena Hutchins, the cinematographer, Joel Souza, the director, and Alec Baldwin, the actor, doing on Bonanza Creek Ranch? You know, movies and magic have always been closely associated. The first people that made movies.
Movies and magic are not
And this imagination
closely associated
that
at all.
happens in movies. You know, King Kong, he can
Movies
stand above
aren't
a city,
magic,
and Superman can fly.
magic's not
horses
real,
and
movies
snakes
are.
And gun battles. For this to all work, for cinematography, what Helena did to work, for acting to work, you have to be so close to the barrier of real and imagined that the viewer feels that they're there, that it's real.
I mean, not really. I've seen some
The
pretty
viewer
shitty
can't see
movies.
strings from the stuntman. The stuntman must leap. The snake must hiss. And guns
Hiss.
happen in movies.
Hit guns
All
happen
over this
in
country
movies?
for
It
many
happened?
decades. Bang, bang. You've all seen it. Guns have been an element of theater and film and television since the earliest of times. Depictions of war and combat, Spartacus, it stirs audiences because it feels
Spartacus
real.
Blood and Sand was cool. as
Later
fuck.
films, Platoon, Apocalypse Now, they showed the unvarnished realities of war. This ranch in Santa Fe, it had been the scene to many gunfights and movie scenes, well before Alec was even born. Laramie, Butch and the Sundance Kid, and these westerns.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Oh, God, I hate this. Objecting during opening and closing is really fucking irritating. It should be extremely limited to misrepresentations of law or gross misrepresentations of fact. I hate that we can't hear what the objection is, but what are we objecting to here? What's your problem? What, reminding people of movies that they liked?
The evidence will show that guns are in movies because movies are about people's lives and guns are in people's lives. So let's talk about the evidence and how the lethal bullet got there. How did this happen and how did it unfold? The evidence
lethal
will be
bullet.
the following. Everybody on a movie set has a role. The armor or armors.
Objection, Your Honor.
director
Spartacus
directs,
didn't
the
have any
actor
guns.
acts. They work in harmony, but they have a division of responsibility. Safety being important has the first assistant director, whose name is Dave Halls, above the armor and the sort of the safety of the set. And on that day in question, the cast and the creative directors and crew in the church, it's a fake church. Their actors are not in their normal clothes. It's costumes. There's debris falling from the ceiling. It's fake debris. And they yell out cold gun. And that is an important term you're going to learn in this case. It means that the gun is cold. No one need worry. But even that requires a little bit more explanation. Cold gun doesn't mean no live bullets. There are for sure 100% no live bullets on movie sets.
Well, I mean,
That's unimaginable.
not for sure
Cold
100%.
means you don't
There's
even have
definitely
the
live bullets on this
fake
one.
blank poof in it. You don't need to worry even about eye gear or earplugs for that fake bang. It means it's empty, inert, cosmetic, can do no harm.
Fake bangs are all this guy's
guns
done for
can't
the
hurt people.
past couple of years of his life.
It's impossible, literally impossible for a cold gun to hurt somebody. You could hurt you more by dropping it on your foot.
Okay, I have to take some umbrage here. This guy's doing okay. But when you start saying that cold gun is yelled and cold gun means it's literally impossible, the jury's got to go, but it was possible because it happened, right? I don't like using words like impossible in court unless you've got an error, like an error in the recording or the examination or something like that. I mean, it was definitely possible for this cold gun to kill someone because this cold gun killed someone. I get what he's saying. He's saying it's supposed to be impossible, but I don't think that this is playing the way he wants it to play because the jury is still sitting there going, it's not that impossible though, right? It's like, it's impossible that a live round would be on a movie set. But if I'm not mistaken, part of the state's case is going to be that not only were there live rounds on this movie set, but people on the movie set were openly firing live rounds during some of the days of the shoot, that they were like little, basically they had a little shooting range and were shooting rounds off on different days. Maybe that's misinformation. Maybe that was something that was bandied about early on and I'm misremembering. It's hard to say because this has been going on for a while. Good pause face on Alec Baldwin there. Hello. Ooh. No one's into that sexy face. I don't know what to say. But I seem to recall there being allegations that people were on set firing live rounds, that there was a lack of general safety around it. So when he's going to sit here and say that it's impossible to have a live round on set and it's impossible to have a live round in a cold gun, it's impossible for a cold gun to kill someone, the jury is going to be like, well, kind of possible, right? But hey, we'll see. I'm not a fan of saying stuff like that. Don't think it plays with the jury.
And that's why these artists are carrying on in their art. Cold gun, all clear to go. And the armorer on this set hands a prop gun to Alec, like she had done times before, like people have done with him in movies for a generation. And he's there. He's in the movie set church with his movie set gear and his holster, and he takes his movie set gun. And he's deeply focused in that moment on his character. The artists, the crew members, they're moving around him. Again, no eye gear or earplugs, nothing to protect against. They carry
I love
on.
it. He's such a dedicated artist.
They take a lunch break.
Defense.
Some folks leave,
no, I'm
some
just
don't.
Too
they
dedicated.
Continue the scene. Dave Halls, the head of safety, is actually practicing the movement so they can frame.
What's your favorite Alec Baldwin role? I really liked him in Beetlejuice.
And the prop cold gun comes back.
He had all the eyeballs
the
on his
prop
fingers.
cold gun comes back. Cold gun.
Cold gun.
They call it again. Same gun, again, safe. The first assistant director, Dave Halls, head of safety for the entire film, a man with decades of experience, comes and takes the additional step and inspects the gun, verifies again, cold gun. Everyone relax. Go back to focus on the making of a movie. There's nothing in the gun that can hurt anybody. And Alex sits on that pew. And the creative directors,
Jobu,
crew,
yeah,
they're
in The
moving around him
Departed,
in
when he
front of him.
punches that guy in the face, is one of the
And
funniest
Haldeman Rust,
things.
he begins, like the prosecutor told you, rehearsing, acting. This is a completely mundane, uneventful, routine act on a movie set.
I, of course,
on a
love
movie
Glenn
set.
Gary, Glenn Ross.
And so everybody carries on. Nobody fathomed, imagined, foresaw any possible danger.
Guys,
They
I'm going to be
moved
going
around
on with
Alec as he
Mephisto's
practiced his
movie
draw.
reviews, and we're going to
As the
talk about
prosecutor
Glenn
put
Gary,
it,
Glenn
working out
Ross.
the details of the move
Maybe
and the
even
action.
tomorrow. We'll try and announce it.
He does it again, does it in a
Great
different
movie.
way. Nobody bats an eye. And they will tell you that the investigation revealed that Baldwin was practicing drawing and pointing the weapon of the scene with guidance and instruction from Helena Hutchins and Joel Souza. The gun
I
goes
wouldn't
off.
take any
Everybody's
direction
shocked.
from them.
Alec is startled. He immediately says, "I didn't mean to shoot I didn't pull the trigger." Immediately.
I didn't mean to do that.
What the hell just happened? They collectively explain.
Why did that woman die?
Shock turns to panic. 911 is called.
We need an ambulance out at Bonanza Creek Ranch right now. We've had 2 people shot on a movie set accidentally. He said someone was shot? 2 people accidentally with gunshots as on movie set, Bonanza Creek Ranch. Send it. I'll connect you with medical dispatch. Don't need that. Santa Fe Fire and EMS, what's the location of the emergency? Bonanza Creek Ranch. We've had 2 people accidentally shot on a movie
She
set
never
by
died.
prop
This is still
gun.
part of the
We need
movie.
help immediately. Okay.
This is a very meta film.
This AD that yelled at me at lunch because asking about revisions. His mother, did you see him lean over my shoulder and yell at me? He's got disgusted guns. He's responsible for what happened in the now, Mimi? No. I'm a strip supervisor. How many people are injured? 2 that I know of. I was sitting, we were rehearsing, and it went off, and I ran out.
Accidentally shot.
On a movie set with a prop gun. The AD, it was his responsibility. Not a word about Alec Baldwin. While they're en route, police, EMS, the cast and crew are outside trying to figure out what happened, frantic, talking to those responsible for the prop and its safety. The armorer is yelling, sorry. Halls, the first assistant director, is panicked. The prop master, Sarah Zachary, I don't know exactly where she is at that
Prop
point,
master.
but they check the gun feverishly. They take the ammo out of the gun.
I thought
They
prop
look at
slavery
it,
was
what the
illegal.
heck happened. They go back to the prop cart that houses the ammo. They're touching the gun and manipulating the gun, emptying it. They go and move some stuff off the prop cart, trying to figure it out. Sarah Zachary, the head of props, will tell you she threw some stuff out. And eventually, of course, EMS and police arrive pretty soon thereafter. And Helena Hutchins and Joel Souza, the director, are transported to the hospital where Helena tragically passes away. And I'm not going to be asking questions about her condition after she was wounded or the medical interventions that followed. Her injuries, the efforts to revive her, are not in dispute in this case. The evidence will be there. The prosecutor may present some of these emotionally charged images, but we're not going to be asking questions about that, and it's not an issue in dispute in this case. You jurors are allowed to ask yourselves whether or not that should be the focus or the focus should be the evidence. So police enter the scene. They have lapel cameras.
That was kind of good.
Thank God they have
The
lapel
state's going to
cameras.
focus on
You
stuff
wanna
that
see what
doesn't
happens?
matter.
The evidence will show you
It's
can
up
play
to
the
you
videotape.
whether they
Want
should
to see
or
if they
should
take the right
focus on the
gun?
evidence.
Play the videotape. Want to make sure what the people said or did, they're remembering correctly? Play the videotape. And so they immediately recover the prop gun and they secure it. That's off to the side. And the reason that you preserve things in the moment is so that you know what existed in the moment, the evidence in the moment, the people and the witnesses and what they said in the moment. These folks, the members of Rust, they'd never been through anything like this before. That is why what they originally said matters so much in this case. If you remember anything I say today as the evidence proceeds, remember that. Look at the evidence of what the people of
Alex
Rust
gotta
said
work on
and
that
did
face.
that
That's a
day.
terrible look for him.
Life changes, memories change. There are human motivations, internal pressure, external pressure. That's why preservation is so important. So the police continue. In terms of the prop cart and the prop ammo that's on the cart, it's manipulated, altered, kind of messy. And, you know, at this accidental shooting on a movie set, the police begin to make some mistakes. No one had ever investigated a prop gun on a movie set before. They recover the prop gun, but they don't wear gloves. They don't have the prop car inside the crime scene. Someone moves it onto the crime scene. People start touching it and showing, okay, this is a dummy, this is a blank. And then they make another mistake that matters in this case with some more significance, which is that they don't secure the prop truck that houses the cart. See, that cart that they roll off comes from a truck where all of the ammunition, all of the firearms are, and that's where they're stored. They don't secure the prop truck for several days. And then the prop house that supplies the truck, that supplies the cart, they don't secure for over a month. A lot of mistakes. They had never investigated a case in a movie set. But they had the prop gun.
How do those mistakes impact Alex?
And so they needed to figure out where the live bullet
Tell us how that
came
works.
from. They had the shell casing, Starline brass. That's the sort of make. You'll hear that phrase, Starline brass. And the police were right to focus on that. That was the lethal element. And so they work outward. Makes good enough sense. Folks around the ammo and the gun to be interviewed at the precinct. The
Because Alec
armorer
Baldwin,
at the precinct. She
maybe
loaded
he
the
should
live
have
bullet.
played a few more
Halls, head of
defendants
safety,
in a
he
movie.
double-checked.
He'd have pulled off
And
the look
Alec
better.
walks up to the police. You'll see this early today. And he says, I'm here, whatever you want to do, whatever you need me to do. Just tell me where to go.
Who do you need me to shoot this
And
morning?
Sarah Zachary, the prop master who threw out the stuff at the cart, they missed her that night to bring to the precinct. But the rest of them at the precinct. And thankfully, we have the lapel cameras.
And then they cleared the gun outside after his request, and I witnessed them clear it and saw the bullets.
Okay.
So the one that was yesterday, the one that fired, we don't know, but all the other ones were proper.
I can pause this. I can turn this off.
I can pause this. I can turn this off.
That was just a quick snapshot of the scene.
Let's approach each other. This is Ms. Johnson.
So what he's doing here, the objection is likely that he's introducing evidence in his opening argument that they may not be allowing in the trial.
The remaining witnesses from inside the church are interviewed on the scene. They're interviewed with lapel cameras. They're interviewed by the lead detective, Detective Cano. And those witnesses, some of them will come in here and testify. And not a single one of them will tell you anything different than what I'm about to tell you about the evidence. The gun was double checked, verified it was a cold gun, not an actor's responsibility to check. Safety was ensured before. Alec was doing his practicing, his rehearsing, his movements. People manipulate and point guns on movie sets. The gun went off during the
How do you
rehearsal.
manipulate a gun?
No one saw him intentionally pull the trigger.
You really don't like that woman.
It
do
was
you?
obviously a tragic accident.
She's terrible.
But Alec
Making
committed
fun of
no
you the whole
homicide.
time. You can put her down.
Alec took the gun from those charged with its safety. He did not tamper with it. He did not load it himself. He did not leave it unattended. It completed his costume and his character. It was an actor handling a prop and integrating it into the character of Harlan Rust. There was a dedicated professional there, off camera, whose sole sacred responsibility was that prop safety. And Dave Halls, the head of safety, was there by her side. Everyone relied on that. And it was tragic that they let them down.
Are you going to cry?
He was just acting as he has done for generations.
Oh,
And
if
it
the
was
lawyer
safety
would have
apparatus
cried, it
that
would have been
failed them all.
fucking brilliant.
So law enforcement continues. They need to find the live bullet. That was the lethal element. So they, led by Detective Cano, execute a search warrant on the church. And that's what law enforcement does. They immediately go to a judge. They say, this is what we need to do. They go into the church urgently before anything can be altered. They're confirming it was an accident, not a crime in the church. They search for guns and ammunition, videos and photos. There was no further answer in the church. They had the prop gun. They had
There's
all those
no
witnesses
further answer in the church.
secured.
Wow.
Their statements are clear.
Strong religious statement there.
Alec had committed no crime, but the bullet was a mystery. And so they focus on the bullet, the critical, lethal bullet, and how did it enter
I
the
keep
movie
looking
set.
away when DUI guys on the stream.
So they had the prop cart, and then they go do the warrant on the prop truck. And so at that point, and I'm going to put up a photo so that you can see who some of these individuals are. They're trying to figure out when they go to the truck, what is the source of the lethal bullet? And so they execute a warrant on the truck approximately a week later. The Seth Kenny that you heard about in the prosecutor's opening, the supplier for the set, he's there. Sarah Zachary, the prop master, she's there.
Oh, a
and
flow
they walk
chart.
through what's inside of the prop truck with law enforcement. But there's no answer to the lethal bullet.
Why did the pictures I
And
saw of Hannah
this
Gutierrez? She looked
case
way
then
worse
takes
than
on,
that.
all this pressure. The media begins swirling. Where is the lethal bullet? How did it get on that movie set? And what about that actor, Alec Baldwin, who had nothing to do with why the bullet got on the movie set? And so police and prosecutors, they work hand in hand, meeting after meeting, trying to find the lethal bullet, meeting with Seth Kenny, meeting with Sarah Zachary, the prop master, the supplier. Where is it? And about a month after the incident, Sarah Zachary finally sits down with law enforcement to answer some questions. And she explains to them that she threw away some stuff. She disposed of some stuff. And the prosecutors and police keep meeting, swirling media. And then at that point, they go to the last step, right? Done the cart, gone to the truck, met with Sarah Zachary, and they go execute a search warrant on, as the prosecutor told you, PDQ, the prop house. And again, Seth Kenny's there to greet them, let them in, and they don't find the lethal bullet. They never did. They never did.
They never found
And
the
as
lethal
things
bullet.
roll into police and prosecutors, cell phones and photos and forensics, looking for this shiny object, they found another shiny object. Instead of trying to find the source of the lethal bullet,
They found Alec Baldwin.
they focused on Mr. Baldwin.
Eric Baldwin.
But Mr. Baldwin was like every other actor. He goes bang bang in
he's the
movies.
greatest-
He's told when guns are cold or not.
Bang, bang
He
in
rehearses and
movies.
acts as his character. Safety
on, man.
proceeds before the actor.
He's not like any
Once
other
the
actor.
has the prop
greatest
gun,
actor
he
of
can
all
handle
time.
it however a person he's acting as would. A properly cleared gun can't hurt anybody. And so they told you about some of the things that Alex said in the statements that they will take or picked out a few lines from. But he won't tell you anything different, that he took a gun loaded and cleared by the armor and the AD. He made motions with the gun as he was rehearsing. He didn't intentionally pull the trigger. The gun just went off. And he does say, I didn't have a problem with the gun before. And this idea, that they said that he didn't want to check because he would offend them. In this moment, he's been doing this for 40 years, the evidence will show. And he has habits. And there are also SAG guidelines that tell actors what to do and what not to do. And the SAG guidelines don't tell actors to check the gun. You will see them.
I
That's
prefer the
not
Film
actor's
Actors
role.
Guild.
And so I guess the point that they're trying to make is that why in this specific moment he doesn't break his habit of 40 years and check it differently and sort of insult them this one time. If he had done that and started playing with the gun in that way, they'd be saying, arrogant actor, why is he doing that? So they will play these statements, Alex statements. You're going to hear a man in shock and grief.
What's interesting? He does have a point here. No matter what Alec Baldwin did, they're going to say he should have done the other thing. So this is a common thing. Andrew Branca's talked about this a lot with self-defense cases. If you use a 22, they'll say, oh, they used a 22, a sneaky gun that wasn't so noticeable, blah, blah, blah. If you use a 45, they'll be like, they used the biggest, scariest gun they could. If you use a 38, it's like, oh, this is the most common gun that's used in handgun crime. They always will have a reason why the thing you did was the worst thing, and it will contradict the previous case that the prosecutor argued that fucking morning. They do this in every single instance. They will always paint everything that you, the defendant, have done as the worst choice. And the way that they rely on this psychological trick that brains do is you go, well, it must have been the wrong choice because someone's fucking dead, right? So it must have been the wrong gun to use because someone's fucking dead. Alec Baldwin it must be bad that he didn't do the safety check this time because someone's fucking dead. But if he had done the safety check, they would have said, see, he did the safety check with the armor, but he knew she was inexperienced. And that safety check is why Helena, or that woman, why she's dead. It's always that way. That's how criminal prosecutions work every fucking time. There is no right way to do something because they work backwards from the conclusion and say that every choice leading up to the bad outcome was the source of the bad outcome and any other choice would have been better. It doesn't actually work that way. You can't know what the outcome would have been other than the outcome that did exist. But that's a psychological trick that they use. Yeah, if they use an AR-15, well, that's because they use an AR-15. If they use an AK-47, it's because it's scarier than an AR-15. If they use a handgun, it's like, well, because they had ready access to handguns and they were able to get their hands on one. If it was a shotgun, they'd be like, well, because they knew shotguns do more damage and don't need to be as accurate, whatever. It's all bullshit every time. The Squid says, actor or not, it's basic weapon safety to check everything yourself and treat it like it's loaded. Agree. And this is going to be, in my opinion, this is one of the state's strongest arguments. I praised the defense attorney for talking about how these are different rules, which I think is critical to try and convince a jury of. But at the end of the day, you have a gun in your hand, you point it in a direction of someone, you pull the trigger and they died. Like, there's one person who could have not pulled that trigger. And that's Alec Baldwin. And that's it doesn't necessarily mean he's guilty, but it sure makes it a big fucking hurdle to jump over. He says, and as producer, well, see, that's the thing. Alec Baldwin is not on trial as producer. He won that at pretrial motions, I think just yesterday. So he's not on trial as producer, which is a really good thing for him, because if he was on trial in his role as a producer, he's responsible for everything that happens on that set. Or a lot. I shouldn't say everything, but he's got a lot more culpability. He's just on trial as Alec Baldwin, the actor in this case. But you say Baldwin was responsible for everything and ignored safety concerns that were raised. I agree, but he somehow got out of that, I believe.
A father, an artist, worried about his family. You hear he's, on one of the calls, he's going to meet with the decedent's family, the Hutchins family, and he's upset about that. He will talk to law enforcement. He will call them. He doesn't need a lawyer. He didn't commit a crime. He will call them and offer to meet and speak over and over again.
Bad choice.
And
don't do that.
Anyone in the acting world. Actors know. Actors rely on armors and point guns and shoot guns.
I didn't commit a crime. Woman's dead and you pull the trigger. Always call a lawyer.
What they did is clear and proven. The head of safety, you will learn, took responsibility for his verification failure. But Alec committed no homicide. So law enforcement didn't have a homicide case against Alec Baldwin.
No, I mean, Alec Baldwin did commit a homicide. Homicide is just when one homo kills a person. I mean, it's when one person kills another person. So Alec Baldwin commit a homicide. He just may not be guilty of a criminal act. That's different.
But they changed the question. You heard the prosecutor tell you about this. Did he pull the trigger? Did he pull the trigger? Did he intentionally pull the trigger? And if he did, of course, that would only make his statement incorrect, right? That would mean he would have misspoke, been incorrect, and I want to stop for a moment and just tell you, because you're going to hear a lot of testimony, expert testimony, like the prosecutor told you about.
I mean, it's kind of an important incorrect statement. I didn't pull that trigger, but you did though. I mean, that would just make a statement incorrect. Yeah. Yeah. But it also kind of sounds like I didn't kill that person, but you did. Like, oh, it just went off. But if he pulled the trigger and he said he didn't pull the trigger, it would kind of look like he maybe knew he pulled the trigger and he was trying to come up with some alternative reason as to why he didn't. And this is a weird distinction, because in this case, it's an involuntary manslaughter case. That would make him not pulling the trigger makes much more sense in a murder case. Him saying, I didn't pull the trigger, if like there was some malfunction that caused the gun to go off. But the involuntary manslaughter part, I don't know if they even have to prove that he pulled the trigger. They would just have to prove that he created the situation that led to the death of the person. And merely having a loaded round in that gun and pointing it at a person at an inappropriate time may be sufficient for involuntary manslaughter. You may not have to prove that he pulled the trigger at all. And this is one of the difficulties of involuntary manslaughter is if he intended to point the gun at the woman, that may have been enough for involuntary manslaughter because it's reasonably foreseeable that a malfunction could cause a gun to fire. But they would have to show that maybe he was responsible for having the bullet in there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or he should have not had the bullet. But it's, it gets a little bit complicated because where is the intent? And this is critical because this is where people get hung up on the difference between jury trials and legal argument. The legality of the argument is less important here. And what the jury decides, the line is on where the involuntary manslaughter takes place is much more important. If the jury decides that Alec Baldwin's intentional acts that lead to the involuntary manslaughter are intentionally grabbing the gun, intentionally not inspecting the gun, which is why they're being very specific about stating that he did not do the safety check. He intentionally chose to not do a safety check. So that's an intentional act. He intentionally draws the gun. He intentionally points it at the woman. Does he need to intentionally pull the trigger? Does he even need to pull the trigger for intentionality to occur? Now, in a pure legal sense, maybe he would. But in a jury sense, in the jury's mind, when we say the basic rules of firearm safety is never point a loaded gun at something or a gun at all at something unless you intend to destroy it. Well, now that he's pointed the gun, is that where the jury determines intentionality is? We're not in the realm of pure legality once you're at trial. Once you're at trial, you're in the story that most closely matches pure legality that you can convince the jury of. And then getting away from a jury verdict is exceedingly difficult, even when the jury might be a little bit off on some fact like pulling the trigger. We the Rabble says, actually great opening argument for Alec. I'm already leaning in his favor. Agree that he's ultimately responsible, but can't agree that he's dumb. The Squid says, I should also note that I'm applying my own standards and I don't know the ins and outs of Hollywood procedures. So I don't know how much liability should be held on Baldwin. And a good question for the jury. Again, the jury gets to decide this. Do the Hollywood procedures absolve Alec Baldwin of the basic rules of gun safety? Maybe not. Maybe not.
The gun functioning imperfectly. Did he let the hammer down when he cocked it? Did he hit the trigger? Did he, in a calculated manner, as the prosecutor made a motion, fire the gun like that? And when this issue is discussed, it's easy to sort of pull yourself into courtroom land and away from a movie set. On a movie set, you're allowed to pull the trigger. So even if he intentionally pulled the trigger like the prosecutor just demonstrated, that doesn't make him guilty of homicide. He did not know or have any reason to know that gun was loaded with a live bullet. That's the key. That live bullet is the key. That is the lethal element. But again, as the prosecutor told you, if they could prove that he intentionally pulled the trigger and he was imperfect, imprecise, wrong with what he said, then maybe you take that and you say he's lying. And if he's a liar, he committed homicide. And so what they do is they take the prop gun. They're blinded by the shine. They're blinded
by the shine.
By trying to disprove Alec. They take it and they order a destructive test on the firearm.
See, this is a problem for the prosecution.
They order the FBI to take a test that they know will destroy the firearm. It's a pointless, unnecessary test where they blindly try to make this big case by taking a mallet and smashing the firearm.
Fantastic.
At the time that they did that, they knew that Alec had adamantly maintained that he was manipulating the hammer and the gun just went off. That the witnesses said it went off out of nowhere. That there are these accidental discharges that happen on the set. That guns have issues in the real world.
Okay, you got a problem, man. Problem for me, you just laid out a big problem in your opening argument. You just said it happens. There have been accidental discharges that happen on the set. Well, if you know that there have been accidental discharges that happen on the set, then every other aspect of this needs to be by the book. And now you've weakened the trigger pull argument. If other accidental discharges have happened and you have knowledge of them, wouldn't you think you would be a little bit more cautious about the rest of the gun safety procedures? I mean, I would think so. So I don't like that line of argument that he just laid out, because you just basically said why Alec Baldwin should have been more careful than he was. That's not good. Espresso D says it's not the woman, it's that woman. Get it right. Correct. Yeah, that was in my opinion, that's a mistake in the opening statement. I would not want to be saying that.
This gun had a hair trigger, and the owner's manual of this specific gun says,
why would you have
you load it with a live round?
Why would you have a hair trigger on a prop gun?
In that last position, and you drop it like you see a cowboy in a movie. This type of old cowboy gun can accidentally go off. I don't remember hearing anything about.
Again, if you're going to argue that the owner's manual suggests that this gun is prone to an accidental discharge, then you move the needle away from him having to pull the trigger and having the liability move more towards the mere act of drawing and pointing the gun in the direction of a person and not clearing the weapon yourself and not doing that safety check. Because now you're saying that, well, these people knew that this gun could be fired without an intentional pull of the trigger. No. Do not want that. I would not fucking want that in my opening statement at all. Terrible argument.
About that. The evidence will show that. So rather than trying to answer the question of what happened, they proceed with the destructive test. They eliminate the one item that could prove what Alex said and believed. They didn't offer him a chance to test the gun. They didn't take the gun apart before they broke it.
Ion face, yes, it's
and look
single
at its
action.
inner workings. They didn't turn on their videotape. They just destroyed it. Can't ever be tested in the same condition it was in that day. Won't ever allow Alec to show his truth. And the destruction of this gun that you will hear in this evidence is symbolic of this entire case. Because the
Lava Pepe says, Nick, explain how an actor does that in a dark room frozen in place for the scene. He does it when he's handed the gun. Originally, he goes through the safety check with the armorer before he's on the scene. Here's a thought. You have 6 dummy rounds, right? These are supposed to be dummy rounds, not blanks. Importantly, nothing is supposed to happen with these. You have 6 of them loaded into the revolver. Right? Now you know that these are all dummy rounds. They can't fire. Is this a problem? That seems like an adequate safety check to me. Now, if they're blanks, obviously you have a different issue, right? If you're actually utilizing a blank to fire for the scene, you can't do that type of safety check. But he's arguing that these are dummy rounds, that these can't even fire. So the safety check seems to be just clearing the 6 rounds, making sure none of them fire. And Dan Rose is correct. The scene wasn't even being filmed, shouldn't even need dummies. And that is a thing I think people miss. And that's going to be it's a problem with the opening statement, but that I don't think that the prosecution capitalized on is that this was a scene. This was blocking for the scene. There should have been no trigger pull. There shouldn't even need to be rounds in the gun. They didn't even need to use the prop gun for this scene. They could have used a completely dead gun. For this practice, for this rehearsal. They didn't need to do what they did. And that I think lends a big problem for Alec Baldwin. You've got these processes that could have been put in place and weren't. They weren't put in place. And I know people are saying he's an actor and he should have gotten a cold gun from the prop master and the armor. And I agree with you. But I'm telling you that if you were Alec Baldwin, well, if you were Alec Baldwin, but if you are there and someone takes a gun and it goes through 8 firearms instructors, and they all clear the weapon as a cold gun. And then the 8th one hands it to you and says, cold gun. We all checked it. And you point that gun at someone and pull the trigger and they die. You've got the fucking problem. It's just that those 8 other people may have the problem also. And that's just a reality. This is the hard part of any of these cases. When you point a gun at someone, pull a trigger, and they die, juries go, but you killed him though. No matter how good your argument is but you killed him though. And that's the hurdle Alec has to overcome. Does not mean he's guilty. When I bring these things up, I'm pointing them out as problems for Alec Baldwin, not as solutions, final solutions for the case. USSJ4 Broly says he shouldn't have to check a gun. Many others have. Again, if you say, well, everybody else checked the gun and then I pulled the trigger, you still pulled the trigger. And a jury can decide that you are guilty and culpable for that. Grifty says, mind sharing my gifts and go. Grifty, you are welcome to share it in the chat. You can even pin it if you want. I'm not going to pull it up right now. I DM'd it to you on Twitter. I'll bump it. If not, it's totally cool. Hope things are headed the right way for you and yours. I'll review it, buddy, and then maybe on the next stream I can share it, but I'm not gonna pull it up on the stream. John Jelaine says, I plead to the court the possibility of massive plausible deniability of the defense. That's what they're going for here. And guess what I'm going for, guys? It's pee break time. It'll be a quick one. I just really, really, really fucking have to pee because I drank a lot of tea and I'm out of it. Now I'm on to Coke, cherry Coke. Delicious. I'll be right back.
He drank a fair bit and then realized that his bladder can't handle the liquor inside, leaving us with his chair while he runs up the stairs, hoping the stream doesn't suddenly die. While we are waiting, we'll be laughing at you. The drinking along is what most of us do. The chat is united, getting excited for what you have for us when your pain is through. When you have small bladder and no sphincter control, freedom of the liquor doesn't mean freedom from soaking your drawers. Now you're washing your hands and you realize that you've forgotten to scrub both the front and the back. Then you'll grab a quick bite, kiss your lady goodnight, and remember to thank her for all of the snacks. Whoa, water will cure your hangover. Oh, just drink some when the stream is over. When you have small bladder and no sphincter control, freedom of the liquor doesn't mean freedom from soaking your drawers. Soaking your drawers.
Hey, what's up, guys? We're back. Sorry about that. Whew. Had to get back into the old saddle here. Here we go. Back to this.
Officers will tell you at that point, they weren't really investigating.
We the Rabble says, remind us, what's he on trial for? What's the requirements for guilty? He's on trial for involuntary manslaughter. I don't know the exact elements. Maybe I'll look them up when the opening argument's done.
Anymore. They were trying to disprove Alec, to get Alec to have this day. And so after the destruction of the firearm, they hired some expert witnesses you heard about to pick up the pieces, so to speak. And the state retained Lucian Haig, an expert with over half a century of experience.
Over
And
half
he will come
a
into court and he will
century.
tell you he's never seen anything like this in his entire career. they conducted a pointless test, a test that would lead to inevitable destruction of the firearm. There were other correct tests that they could have done to prove whether or not it could have accidentally discharged. None of the experts can test the gun in the condition it was in on the day in question. Why? Not because of something that Alec Baldwin or the crew members of Rust did. They were all clear. The gun just went off. But because of something that law enforcement did, and they deprived him of that opportunity. However, Lucian Haig will tell you that in his analysis, he did find modification that he thought likely pre-existed the FBI testing.
Ooh.
And what that modification means and how it impacted the gun is hard to perfectly know, of course, but it was a modification on an important part, the critical part of the firearm. And it was important enough for them to put into a report and to write a new opinion about. They felt this revelation had to be sent to prosecutors, and they maintained that position that this modification was a matter of import for almost a year. And then a few weeks ago, before trial, they just took it back. They just took it back. You will get to see the circumstances of that take back.
USSJ 4 Brawley says,
go for the shiny
who checks the fake explosives or fake landmines?
They never solved the question.
Well,
of the lethal
children
bullet.
in third world
they
countries
destroyed the
typically.
gun, and all they were left with is Alec Baldwin and the movie they intend to put on. But because they never solved the lethal bullet, they eliminated the prop gun. There will not be one witness, not one shred of evidence in this trial that Alec knew or should have known the gun was loaded with a live round.
Ooh.
So they can't prove. They can't prove their high-profile homicide case. So they will proceed.
That's an interesting point.
To then here and now tell you about other things, other evidence that you will hear that has nothing to do with what happened in the church on October 21st. That the movie set as a whole was improper or anything. That they hired the wrong armorer. I think I heard in opening. The evidence will show that the armorer was hired by somebody else, trained by somebody else, had done gun scenes on Rust with somebody else before Alec even got there. She was the daughter and the apprentice of the most famous and well-respected armorer in Hollywood. And she had just left serving, being an armorer for Nicolas Cage on another Western. Then they'll come in and they'll say, but what about the movie guidelines? You heard about Mr. Jorgensen and the movie guidelines.
The movie guidelines, the
one of the
guidelines.
protocols wasn't followed. Or there was a set safety issue about something unrelated to this. Like these movie guidelines on a set or the things of Navy SEALs and NASA. The guidelines were followed. They followed the safety guidelines. Actors don't check the weapons. Safety is ensured by dedicated personnel. So they will say, but there had been accidental discharges.
God, I thought
on the
the
set,
shape of Alec Baldwin's eyes was his glasses, but it's actually just his eye skin. Gross.
But again, that's the people we looked at. Hannah Gutierrez-Reed's fault.
He looks like he's wearing
Sarah
thin frame
Zachary's fault,
glasses.
perhaps Dave Hall's fault.
It's terrible.
Faults, workplace issues. Some of them will end up, and you will hear the witnesses in this case. Many of them have brought civil lawsuits. And you'll hear that, in those civil lawsuits, they're presenting evidence to try to meet a burden, not a criminal beyond a reasonable doubt homicide trial burden, but they're going to try to prove their cases in civil courts. And that's where faults and accidents are at worst 99% worked out. Not here. But you'll hear these members of the Rust crew come in here. They'll try to make sense of this for you. Some of them have sued. Some of them are in grief. Some of them are in grief and have sued. And part of this grief they feel, that everybody feels, is understandable. And what they will do is they will tell you, if only we had had a second armorer. One of them will say, if only Dave Halls had checked better. If only the camera hadn't been right there and Ms. Hutchins wasn't leaning over the camera. If only I myself did this. If only Alec did that. This is natural, their testimony. It's part of the human condition. It's part of grief.
Objection, Your Honor.
None of them knew.
Yes.
This is a third objection during opening statements. You know what I'm noticing is all these trials that I keep watching, the fucking state is objecting during opening and closing, whereas the defendants are usually not. except what was it, Chandler Halderson, when the defense objected during the state's close because the state fucking violated.
As I was saying,
well, they misstated the
the
law
witnesses in their grief
or the
will
evidence. I can't
look
remember
for
what it
reasons
was.
to
It
try
was
to make
really
sense of
bad.
this tragedy.
Probably
But again,
mistrial-worthy.
None of them knew or should have known about the lethal bullet either. No one had any idea that it was on that set or in that gun. In that world, they were all in it together. And you will hear that none of this other stuff has anything to do with those two critical questions we started with. Why there was a live bullet on set, why the armorer placed it in the gun, and of course, why the head of safety failed to detect it. None of it speaks to whether Alec knew or should have known those things. He didn't. No one on that set did. It was not foreseeable. You will hear that word from the witnesses and from eventually the instructions. Foreseeable. This was anything other than foreseeable. And
I mean,
they
you
must
pointed
prove beyond any and all reasonable doubt
gun
that
at
this was
someone. It's foreseeable that it could go off
total
and shoot 'em.
indifference to human life, that death might occur. He's an actor. He's an actor. But here we are at a homicide trial. And so they will pull witnesses, and witnesses will be cross-examined. They will push themselves to the edge of truth and beyond. You know, these things about, Alec didn't notice this or Alec didn't notice that. I want to make sure that you're clear on something that the evidence will show. He had been filming on that set for a handful of days.
I've got a handful.
The evidence will show he had just gotten there. It's not as if he had been there for months and months and noticed things and failed things. And he had just gotten there. You don't notice every little thing when you start at a new place and when you're in the character of Harlan Rust. But they will push forward.
Stop with the in the
and they will
character
have
of
gaps in the evidence as well.
Harlan Rust would have
Don't
noticed.
expect you to be hearing and for them to call the first AD head of safety. I don't know if you'll be hearing from the lead detective, Cannell, who investigated this case, the lead detective, or the sergeant that supervised him, Sergeant Zook. I don't think you'll hear from Mr. Schilling, who was the lead investigator for the prosecutors. And so as you hear this, you jurors can assess about that gap of evidence. And there's one thing that I can tell you you will not hear also. You will not hear from an actor or an expert in acting. And so they will play the videotapes of Alec Baldwin,
Poor
the
Alec.
actor, acting. They will show you perhaps over and over again him in shooting scenes. Bad Alec shooting a gun the wrong way in a movie scene. They will try to get you to picture that and forget that this was a movie set in the first place. And you will see actors in a Western acting. And your mind might go to your favorite gun scene in your favorite movie. You may picture actors and actresses doing exactly what you see here. The other actors in Rust doing the same thing that Mr. Baldwin was doing. But when you come back from that moment, remember, this is a homicide trial. And you will see soon that the reason they play those videos of him over and over is because they don't have any evidence of actual homicide. And you will learn the truth. Not a day goes by when we don't wish Alec had saved her life. But never, the witnesses will tell you, in the history, is something that an actor has done. Intercepted a live bullet from a prop gun. No actor in history. No one could have imagined or expected an actor to do that. So just remember that truth.
I mean, but we all
So when
could
they cry out
expect
justice,
a prop
justice
gun to
is
kill
truth.
someone because it's happened.
This was an unspeakable tragedy. Alec Baldwin committed no crime. Thank you.
All around, not a
All right,
bad
thank you.
opening statement.
What we're going to do now is we're going to take our.
Not a bad opening statement. Oh no, I got to change the screen quick. Ah. So there we go, guys. There's the opening statements in the Alec Baldwin trial. And we'll have to see how it pans out. I mean, each of them have their narrative, right? Oh God, this shirt is so wrinkly. Looks like Alec Baldwin's eye skin. Yeah. Anyway, we'll have to see how it pans out, right? Like Alec Baldwin is on trial. We'll have to see if he's able to beat these charges. The narratives have been set by the state and by his defense team. The state's narrative is fairly straightforward. If you wiggle your little pea shooter around at the office and then your little pea gets shot on someone and they die from it, then, that's bad and you should go to prison. And the defense team says this isn't a regular office. We wiggle our peas at whoever we want and we shoot peas all over them all the time. They just don't die from it because it's make-believe and movie magic. And we followed all the make-believe movie magic rules. Prosecutors like, but not the real rules, just the make-believe pretend ones. And so that's going to be the whole thing. Do you convince the jury that Alec Baldwin needed to be under the real rules of firearm safety? And I say real rules, they're not like real rules. People might misunderstand this, like the whole like clear a gun, don't point it at someone, blah, blah, blah. Those are rules in the sense of like it's good gun safety, but it's not a rule in the sense of there's a law. It's not like it's codified that you need to do these things. It's just that's how you keep from killing people in general terms. But if you convince the jury that those rules don't apply and a different set of rules does, both of these rules really are make-believe. Like, honestly, the gun safety rules are make-believe. They're useful. They're beneficial. They're good safety and good practice. But they're pretend. They don't actually make people not die. They just make it less likely that someone will if people follow them. But when I say they're pretend rules, there's not like a book that says you have to follow these. And lots of people don't follow the rules and people don't die all the time. The other rules are make-believe rules too. They're just like, these are the rules you should have on a movie set. Because when you're not on a movie set, you probably don't have an armorer and a prop master because you're just a normal person walking around. And since you don't have an armorer and a prop master, you need to do these things. And that's going to be part of, the defense's strategy is like, he's not under these rules. That's for you lowly peons in the jury. This is the rules that you would be under, but this is Alec Baldwin. And he is under a different set of rules. He's under this set of rules that recognizes that there are other people in charge of these little petty things. And once you have other people in charge of this, your liability goes in a way different direction because you aren't expected to do all these parts. No, someone else is. That's why we hire these people. You're allowed to rely on them to eliminate the amount of decisions that you have to make and concerns that you have so you can focus on the other stuff. And we do this all over the place. All over the place in our lives. It only becomes apparent in a case like this because someone's fucking dead. Right? But there's all sorts of places where we become lax on some rules because we employ either people or machines to take care of those things that we would otherwise have to take care of. I mean, think about just working in a factory, for example, right? Like working in any sort of factory, especially with CNC machinery and shit like that. Just go on Instagram and type in Asian accident videos and you'll see all kinds of ungodly horrors from people having accidents. But we have tons of procedures in place for those workplaces. OSHA exists, even though OSHA is kind of a bitch organization, but OSHA exists specifically to create a different set of rules. And if you follow those rules, it absolves you of liability. But without that set of rules, like if you're not under OSHA, if you're not under the OSHA regulations and you do it, you're under a different set of rules. And so this is kind of common that we have like multiple sets of rules depending on the circumstances that we're in. But you always, when someone's dead, you always have to convince a jury that you followed the right set of rules for that occasion and that the right set of rules that existed was reasonable and that you didn't actually violate anything and so you're not liable. I said, we do this all the time in different capacities. It just matters more when someone gets a bullet through their chest and they die from it. We've got, We the Rabble says downside is defense is arguing this is not a murder. It's not a murder trial though. Yeah, I mean, it's not a murder trial. It's a manslaughter trial, involuntary. And that's a critical element. But see, there's psychology to all of this. Remember, you're in a jury trial. You're not in the realm of pure legality. Alec Baldwin not pulling the trigger may not legally matter. It also may legally matter. But it matters to the jury because if Alec Baldwin pulled the trigger, motherfucker is more guilty to them. I mean, he'd be more guilty to me, right? If he didn't pull the trigger, he seems less guilty. The question is, does him lying about pulling the trigger or not make him more or less guilty? Effectively, no. right? Doesn't make him more guilty. If he's lying about pulling the trigger, but he wouldn't be, if he would have told the truth, would it change the outcome? Practically, no. But psychologically, maybe, because people don't like liars. If you lie, they think you're guilty. If you tell the truth, they think you're not guilty, even if the actual effect is the same. If he says, oh, I didn't pull the trigger, and he did pull the trigger, or if he says, I did pull the trigger, but it shouldn't have, like the gun shouldn't have fired, does that change the fact that he pointed a gun at someone and pulled the trigger? No. But one of them sounds less guilty, doesn't it? Isn't that weird? That's just how human psychology works. And you're not in a purely legal arena once you're at a jury trial. You're now in a quasi-legal, quasi-persuasive storytelling arena. It's a lot more psychology comes into play. Fudbusters says gun safety is not real. Hey, what's up, Fudbusters? How you doing, buddy? It's all make-believe. It's all made-up rules. It's all made-up rules. Call it Alec takes a stand, yay or nay. Sounds like no. No, his attorney said you're not going to have a single actor or an actor, an expert on actors testifying about Alec Baldwin's acting. So that implies that Alec Baldwin probably isn't going to testify either. And he shouldn't. He's terrible at talking. His post homicide interviews were not good at all. He sounds non-empathetic. He sounds actually fucking cold. He keeps calling her that woman. He can't think of her name. It's like Helena now. I think is her name Helena, whatever. They got her name now, but in the aftermath of killing this woman, he couldn't think of her name to save his life. And that's not really like a shitting on Alec Baldwin thing. That's likely stress related. It's why you just should not, after a traumatic event like you killing someone, the trauma is all on the killer. No, but after you kill someone, you shouldn't be talking to the police at all, because most people are not prepared for the trauma of killing someone, even in self-defense, even completely justifiably. Most people don't kill other people. If you're not traumatized by killing someone else, you probably have prior killing someone else experience, and maybe you're good at it. I don't know. But most people are not good at killing other people and good at dealing with it in the aftermath. And so they're in a state of shock. And they don't answer questions well. That's why you should always have an attorney, especially when someone dies. You really should take care of that. Okay. That's Alec Baldwin. I'm going to briefly talk about Trump's immunity. I'm going to take these headphones out. Pull them out. I'm going to briefly talk about Trump's presidential immunity and what it means, because there's an interesting factor or facet to the presidential immunity case that I'm trying to kind of get the word out about. I haven't been following what other people are saying about it, but when I mention it, people haven't heard about it as much. But here's the thing. Presidential immunity should have been a foregone conclusion. I've talked about this multiple times, but presidential criminal immunity effectively mirrors civil immunity for presidents. If it's an official act of the president, they need to be immune from criminal liability. That's part of the gig. And for anybody who thinks it's like weird or whatever, let's remember that we give fucking postal workers qualified immunity. Like, we give every government employee has qualified immunity so long as they're acting within their role and their actions are discretionary. They're immune from all sorts of shit. Hell, prosecutors and police officers are immune effectively from perjury, from false accusations, from defamation, from all sorts of shit. They get this level of immunity in several areas. Extending it to the president of the United States should not be a big surprise. The idea is this an official act of the president? If it is, then he needs to be able to act without the fear of being arrested, charged, and convicted for his actions when he leaves office. Because otherwise, how can a president act? His political opponents will just prosecute him for what they don't like. And Congress would have the ability to make a presidential act illegal. In fact, Chuck Schumer is trying to do just that right now. Chuck Schumer is actually trying to pass a bill in the Senate that would make Trump's election interference actions illegal and outside the bounds of presidential immunity. I don't think that's how it works. He's like, we're going to make these unofficial acts. Like, that's not how. You don't get to. If you want to define the scope of the president, you're going to need to amend Article 2 of the Constitution. Like, that's how you do that. But Chuck Schumer, being in the Senate, being retarded, he's going to try and do that anyway. But that's the whole thing, is your political opponents are going to try and make your actions illegal if the president can be prosecuted. Now, why is it taking this long? It's because everybody basically operated with the understanding that there was criminal presidential immunity until Donald Trump, because Donald Trump so incensed his opponents that they went ahead and violated effectively hundreds of years of tradition that just kept presidents immune. Like, we're just not going to do it because it kind of feels grimy and scummy. Oh, and they'll do it back. And, you know, Trump's sitting there like, oh boy, you just wait. Joe, you're going to be a beautiful criminal, a wonderful criminal. The best part is he won't even know. He won't even realize he's in prison. He'll probably be like, well, at least I'm not with Jill, but we'll put her right in there with him. She'll be nagging him for the rest of his life. Probably a short one, probably short. He craps his pants. If he's crapping his pants, he's going to get sepsis. Joe, you're going to prison. You're going, Hillary, you too, because I don't like you. But Trump's like, oh, he's like, oh, they prosecuted me. It's going to go. They want this presidential immunity, right? The White House has said it's a bad decision, but we're gauging our response. Well, yeah, of course. Joe Biden has all sorts of things already that someone could just determine is illegal. And once you do that, every act as president becomes a question mark. We can't have a president with that many question marks. He's not the fucking Riddler. If a president is hamstrung on acting, he will not act when it matters because he'll be worried about his own personal well-being. This is the exact reasoning, by the way, that we use for qualified immunity. We want police officers to do their job in the way that they do it. We don't want them thinking, am I going to get prosecuted for this? Am I going to get sued for this? We give them, within the scope of their job, discretionary authority to make mistakes. And I hate qualified immunity, but we have it. When we put this on the president, it actually makes sense more than just other civil servants. But alas, here we are. Since they're going to try from now on to prosecute every president going forward, we get to be that cool third world country of cyclical political prosecutions. That'll be fun. Just further descend us down the fucking rungs. Why don't you? We'll get to try that out. But with presidential immunity, we get to mitigate that a bit. Here's where it gets interesting, though. So my point in all that is no one should be surprised that presidential criminal immunity exists with the official acts of the president. I personally believe that it should have gone beyond that. I believe it should also encompass unofficial acts. I think the president should be immune from criminal liability because now it's now a question of whether everything's a presidential act or not. And it's going to just bog fucking everything down and be a disaster. But whatever. I think it could have gone farther because impeachment exists. And I think we should just impeach more often. And I actually do. I actually think we should impeach presidents all the fucking time when there's a political will. Oh, wait, there isn't always the political will to impeach a president. Just because some subset of the country doesn't like a president's actions doesn't make them illegal or improper or sufficient to overturn the will of the country that elected them. Impeachment is important. Impeachment needs to be dire. Impeachment shouldn't be flippant. The same with criminal prosecution, by the way. It shouldn't be flippant. It shouldn't be a sword wielded by your political opponents. It never was supposed to be, and only has become recently because people have become petty. Oh, and because they have bloated the fucking federal register and the state registers with so many goddamn laws that it's damn near impossible to not be a criminal if the government wants to make you one. And will simply say that the more opportunity you have to act in a way that impacts others, the more likely it is that you are guilty of a crime. This means that the higher you go in income, the higher you go in civil activities, the higher you go in social influence, the higher you go in politics, the higher you go in your employment, the more tendrils that you have affecting other people, the more likely it is that you commit some sort of crime. In the same way that the more places you travel to, the more likely it is you'll commit a trespass just by default. Just by statistics, you're more likely to commit a trespass if you're not at home as much, right? That's just how this fucking works. The president impacts a lot of people at very high levels, all the way down to very low levels. They come into contact with tons of people. They travel a lot. They go to a lot of places. They say a lot of things. They do a lot of things. And when you combine that with being a billionaire, you have a similar issue. The taxes alone. But since pretty much anybody can be made into a criminal very quickly if the state wants it, we needed this level of insulation for the president. Anybody who thinks that wasn't going to happen, I'm sorry, you were not correct. Now that we have it, though, how does it impact Donald Trump? It's actually really interesting because there's a facet of this presidential immunity that some people missed, myself included, when the initial news came out. Vanessa V says, good seeing you live tonight. Thumbs up. Hey, thanks, Vanessa. You were on point about Alec. He and his squinting, sleeping behind his glasses was hilarious. I know he's in there. He looks like me at 4 a.m. Pork chop Periwinkle says equal protection would be nice. Good luck. Good luck getting equality, man. It doesn't exist. Equal protection under the law. You would have equal protection as president. You would. But that means you have to be the president. But here we go. Here's the thing that a lot of people missed with presidential immunity. Not only does it cover official acts as far as immune from those official acts being criminal acts, importantly, it includes official acts being used as evidence in a criminal trial. And this is critical. This means that any official act, even though the act itself may not be illegal, cannot be used as evidence in a criminal trial. Why does this matter for Donald Trump? Well, Donald Trump was just convicted of 34 counts of falsifying business records in New York. A huge portion of the evidence against him came in the testimony of Hope Hicks, who is on the president's staff. Testimony about acts that Donald Trump did as president after being elected, even though the acts he's accused of doing predate his presidency. This is a problem for the state, especially because the prosecution specifically highlighted the testimony of Hope Hicks as devastating to the president in their closing arguments. The trouble with a criminal trial is that you can't survey the jurors as to what evidence made up their minds specifically. Like, you can't go to the jurors and say, here's a list of evidence. Tell us what was important to you and what's not. One, because it's impractical. Two, because they'd be wrong. Because we're influenced not just by the things that directly and obviously influenced us, but we are influenced on a subconscious level. Little bits of evidence can be persuasive to us, even if we're not cognizant of that persuasion. That's the whole aspect of storytelling and why criminal trials can be so dramatically entertaining and interesting, is because it's the subtlety that might sway a juror to look at a fact in one way versus another way. The same fact can be viewed as positive for the defense or the prosecution if given the right other sort of massaging. And that's where really good trial attorneys come in, right? That is where these guys make their fucking bank, is to take a fact that is either neutral or, even better, take a fact that is good for the opposition and make it good for your own client That's a level of subtlety that usually jurors aren't even aware of happening to them. And it's why you can't trust a juror who says, well, I really cared about this, this, and this, and the other stuff didn't matter. Well, the other stuff likely mattered, and the other stuff is likely what made them care about those things that they list. So right now, we have Donald Trump convicted of these 34 counts of falsifying business records. And the prosecution indicated in its closing statements that Hope Hicks's testimony specifically was devastating, which means that the prosecution thinks that that testimony, which now is potentially exempted by presidential, I shouldn't say potentially, is probably exempted from the trial by presidential immunity. Now you've got a problem because those convictions are sustained by that evidence. And the prosecution thought that that evidence was valuable enough to highlight it. So right now, Donald Trump's 34 felony convictions for falsifying business records hang in the balance. The sentencing has been stayed because we don't even know if the convictions are going to be held up. Best case scenario for Donald Trump will be a mistrial. I mean, I guess best case would be dismissal of the charges. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the judge would issue a mistrial, and the New York Attorney's Office, Alvin Bragg, would have to decide whether or not they could retry Donald Trump effectively without that official acts evidence. And that's a big question mark for them since they relied heavily on it in this trial. Now, can they convict Donald Trump? I think in Manhattan, you could convict Donald Trump of just about anything with the right jury. I don't know that there's a way for him to not get convicted in Manhattan. But therein lies the question. Now that Donald Trump has been convicted, if we go in and say, well, this evidence was used, now he's not convicted, and you retry Donald Trump, can Donald Trump get a fair trial? I don't think he can. It was nationwide news that he was convicted of these crimes. Try and screen that out. That's an exceedingly biased jury pool of the whole goddamn world. How do you try Donald Trump again for a crime that he was convicted of and have it be fair? Because everybody going into that trial is going to go, Donald Trump, I heard he was guilty of this shit already. So now you have the question of not only can they retry the case, or are they confident that they can retry the case, but can they actually retry the case with and give him a fair trial? I would argue that Donald Trump couldn't have gotten a fair trial before his conviction. I don't see how it's even possible now. But this is the question. This is the monkey wrench that presidential immunity has thrown into the political aspirations of people like Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, and of course, Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, special counsel, the possible special counsel. That's a whole nother case that we're going to have to see how it turns out. But I don't have a ton to talk about on the Donald Trump presidential immunity bit. I just really wanted to get it out there because I haven't seen a bunch of people talking about it. And I found that facet of immunity very, very interesting. Everybody thinks of the acts being the crimes, the acts that are immune from prosecution being the crimes or the alleged criminal acts themselves. Most people don't think of the acts being evidence in a criminal trial. Without big chunks of evidence, can you bring these charges? So what's crazy is you could find that these 34 counts are all unofficial acts that all personally benefit the president. I mean, it's an easy claim to make. They're his business records. They're his or him or his corporation's business records, and they all benefit him personally. You can also make the case that they're part of the presidential campaign, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, you say, okay, well, these are personal business records and the corporation's business records. These are not acts of the president. But the acts that follow were official acts. And if they use those to try and prove the unofficial act, you now have an unofficial act being immune from prosecution effectively if all of your evidence comes from official acts that happen later. Really, we should be questioning whether or not later acquired evidence can be proof of a prior act. But I mean, outside of confessions, I guess. But alas, here we are. So I wanted to share that with you guys. Like I said, haven't seen a lot of people talking about it. We're going to probably end the stream for the night. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to try and I'm going to have trouble doing live streaming this week of the of this trial. And as we go on, I've got a lot of very, very critical to me daytime activities coming up. Very good things happening in my personal timeline that I can't really talk about right now. But, you know, let's just suggest humbly that a lot of people's speculations about my situation are very, very incorrect. And some very good news is coming my way. And when I can, I'll share more about it. But that will also impact my streaming schedule. And that's just fine by me at the moment. I have plenty of time to get that back in order. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. And I will try and cover the Baldwin trial a little bit more as I can. And if I can jump into full streaming of it live, I will do so. And I'm, of course, looking for trials to cover in the future as time permits. So hope you guys have a good night. And we'll catch you next time, which is code for cunt. Peace.
Oh, he drinks a fair bit, but you realize that it just helps get his noggin jogging along. With his glass by his side and his kids asleep tight, we'll hear some law-splaining tonight. With his microphone muted, we'll laugh at this boomer until he explains it's all part of the plan. Watch his face become redder as he becomes madder, raging at idiots from Twitterland. From the white shores of Maine to the hills of Glenlivet, there's no one who explains the law better than Nick. So pour out a glass for the ones who have passed to make the law what we have now. Oh, his lady is fair, and she handles herself with the grace of one who has borne many children. As the wife of a lawman, she makes sure that he has the time and the place to provide for them there. So pour out an Ardbeg, a bow, more of love rug. The spirits flow as the ones who get unemployed. So pour out a glass for the team post on Twitter as we hear law-splaining tonight. From the white shores of Nairn to the hills of Glenlivet, there's no one who explains the law better than Nick. So pour out a glass for the ones who have passed to make the law what we have now. Oh, the guests are all plentiful, from Doug T to Drexel. They bring their perspective and spice to the mix. But the reason we're here and the one that we cheer is the one who is showcasing us his career. So pour out a glass for the team post on Twitter as we hear law-splaining tonight. From the white shores of Nairn to the hills of Glenlivet, there's no one who explains the law better than Nick. So pour out a glass for the ones who have passed to make the law what we have.